Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and today I am joined with my friend Garrett, Born2BeRad, man. How are you?
Good, man. How are you doing? Thank you for having me on. Like we talked about really quick before we went on, it's kind of a long time coming. So definitely happy to be here, man.
Yeah, for sure. I was gonna say I think we met back on our friend Ryan. What's it? 1988. What does he put?
Ryan,
What's the year?
Ryan 1988, yeah.
Okay, I was
Yep.
right. I was like, what
Yeah.
year did he put there? Justin, our friend Justin, who is a mutual friend of ours. I think I was on one of his videos, and that's how we connected. I think so.
Mhm.
So it's
Yep.
been a while.
It's it's funny, yeah. I mean, Justin, to be honest, he's one of the guys that I was watching forever when I was like toying with the idea of like even ever starting a YouTube page back in the day. I was always on YouTube, watching other people's videos that were into the same things as me, which is obviously things like movies and collecting and stuff. And Justin was one of the ones that I was watching on a regular basis, and he was such a young kid. At the time, like he must have started, I think, in high school. So we always kind of touched base. Like I would leave comments and stuff. And this was going back probably, man, I'm thinking like 10 years from maybe when I started YouTube. And it was kind of always one of those things I was like, I wanted to get a channel, but, I always made an excuse for it. But it's cool now that, like, I've collabed with him and stuff like that because he was definitely somebody that I was watching way back in the day.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about, like, 10 years ago, because I mean I wasn't on the platform. I've been on here for about 6.5 years or so, a little bit less than that maybe, but it started watching these kind of like movie reviews like Chris Stuckman and things like
Yeah.
that. Maybe like 7 or 8 years ago was when it really started, and so yeah, it's really crazy how this community has evolved, and like I mean obviously I'm sure the pandemic is what I think proliferated a lot of this stuff.
It did
So
with me. It did with me for sure.
yeah, I was gonna say, I was before we jump into this whole thing, tell us more about your channel and stuff like that, because like I always love seeing you on Instagram and posting video clips, and then also the projects you're a part of, because I know you do a few things with Justin and Mel as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, so the channel's at Born to Be Rad. I basically talk all things nostalgia, movies, physical media, and collecting. So I've been really heavy into collecting like my whole life. It could have stemmed from a little kid and it was collecting toys. Like I was big into the first toy I remember getting was He-Man, but it had to be like then I had to get them all, and then it became Ninja Turtles, then I had to get them all, and it was Ghostbusters, and it just kind of always felt the same way. Like I was always stuck on like one thing, and it was like I wasn't happy until I had everything, and then I could, then I move on to the next thing or whatever. But movies and stuff like that has been around with me since probably my teenage years. My uncle really got me into it, and yeah, so I have just a massive collection that I've been collecting for probably over 20 years, and people sometimes will see my stuff and be like, oh, how do you have so much? Yeah, this is like 20 plus years like in the making of this kind of stuff. So I've been around kind of a long time when it comes to that. And starting the channel in 2020 was basically, like you said, almost like a pandemic type of situation where it was something I always wanted to do, but I always felt like there was a reason why it never happened. And finally in 2020, I pulled the trigger because of people that I had met on YouTube through the years of just interacting on in comments and stuff like that, that really pushed me to be like, hey, you should really just do it. And I had equipment because I bought all this stuff for work because I ended up going remote for a while. So I was like, okay, I have the tech to do it. So then I decided to do it. And it was just kind of like I wanted to jump in strong. And I knew that in my head, I'm like, I have such cool stuff to showcase. I have such cool stuff to talk about. I love this stuff. And it just gives me a little bit of break from work because everything with me was always like work, 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 work. I go home from work, I was doing work. I was sending newsletters out. I was doing this. And it was just engulfing like my whole life that I was like, all this other stuff that I collect and I'm still getting stuff in the mail, like nothing is enjoyed anymore. So it was really just kind of a push to start doing this and be like, let me showcase this. Let me use this as like my social environment because of at the pandemic, like I wasn't seeing friends that much anymore. So I started using it socially and I knew I had to kind of come in hot. And I just have a pretty creative mindset, and it goes back to things like I used to do professional wrestling and the independents. So having characters and stuff like that, like is just something I've always known and followed. I mean, I used to write wrestling events like as kids, and we do it on a trampoline. Like it was just
Yep.
always, the creativity for me was always there. So utilizing this platform now to kind of like use that in a different way, and that's why, like you said, I've got so much going on now. Like I created a little faction with two other YouTubers that I had met through just being on YouTube, that I said, hey, these two people were like, this reminds me so much of myself. And it could be either the way they act, what they like, the way they dress, their aesthetic of their channel, like whatever it may be. I was drawn to Mel and Justin, um, in the sense that I'm like, this just feels very much like me. And we came up with the idea to kind of start working together, and on videos and collaborate and stuff like that. And it just really flowed. And to me, it was always like a progression. Like we did, like there was like this YouTuber of the month, horror YouTuber of the month thing, like about a year ago, that Justin nominated me for and nominated Mel. And I didn't really know Mel that much at that point. I think her and I did like one video together, and then it kind of just like all became like, it just, everything just kind of lined up perfectly. So if you go back and you watch like him announcing the YouTuber of the month, and then me winning, and the storyline that was created through that with like people like Dead Pit, who I collaborate with a lot too. It just like, it's like a storyline, and I just feel like everything just kind of worked itself out. As weird as that sounds, like if you watch those videos like leading up to the RadPack, which is our faction or our podcast, whatever it may be, everything kind of almost made sense, and it was like a planned out story, which it really wasn't. But my wrestling mindset was like, oh,
Yeah,
this
no.
makes sense, like this
Yeah.
works, and that's what it's kind of turned into. So now Mel, Justin, and I have created the RadPack, and we would do videos together talking about things that we like. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, where do we go now? And Mel had done podcasts in the past, and she's like, why don't we make this an audio podcast as well? And that's kind of where we're at now. Is it's like we've each got our own channel. We each have, the RadPack has its own channel, and now we're doing stuff on audio podcasts as well. So there's a lot going on over here on the channel. And sorry for the long-winded answer, but it's like, it's just, it to me, it just feels right because of the way everything kind of worked out. Like it just almost like it just made so much sense that I'm like, all right, this is something here, and let's try to run with it, because it wouldn't have worked out this way, I feel like, if there wasn't something here. So um
Yeah, no, I love it because I mean, so I used to watch professional wrestling growing up, and that the storyline, I guess an analogy really works for me. Like I understand. So in fact, actually, you bringing up trampolines and doing all those moves, that's actually how I broke my right arm.
really.
Doing a Rob Van Dam 5-star frog splash and landing in the middle of the trampoline, and then getting scared because I don't want to land on my belly and sticking my arm out and, and buckling it, and that's how that happened.
It's a sign of the times, man. So, it's just so funny because we must have been, we're probably around the same age, because it was around like that late 90s, early 2000s, where all of a sudden like backyard wrestling and trampoline wrestling was like so big. You
Yeah.
get a friend that would buy a trampoline, and everybody would go to their house, and we'd wrestle on it and film it and all this stuff. And then, then for me, it progressed to like building a real ring, and then going to wrestling school, and then doing real, like it kind of was a progression for me when it came to that stuff. But yeah, man. So I'm glad you can kind of see, because even like Mel and Justin weren't really wrestling fans, so they don't see it as much as I do. But
Yeah.
it's just kind of worked out so well. And to me, it's like the channel provides, I want it to make sense. Like I like it to feel like almost like an ongoing show, where they feel like, hey, you got to watch last week to see what happens next. Like there's just little things that I like to dabble in doing that, where things just make sense, and it gets people wanting to come back to kind of see what the next progression is from there.
Yeah, and I really like that aesthetic that you've created. I think just like with like obviously with the colors and the backgrounds of what you're doing, and I think you have a like it's interesting to hear your wrestling background, because I mean obviously this is all clicking to me now. Like this makes complete sense now. Because yeah, there's just all those things just flood back to like my early childhood, and all the things that I've exposed myself to back then, and the WCW, ECW, WWF days, and
Oh yeah.
all those, and but yeah, no, I'm kind of curious, obviously, before we jump into film, and for people who are watching this, if you like wrestling, here we go. But I was kind of curious. You said you went to wrestling school, right? And tell me more about like kind of that trajectory. Then we'll go back to film and
Sure.
get there?
So what's funny is it goes back to just being a kid and being obsessed with wrestling, like obsessed to like that's the only thing I cared about, and the idea where I was really small growing up. Like I was in high school and I was literally one of the smallest kids. I ended up getting cut from all the sports about junior year because I still just never grew. I still looked like I was a little kid and everybody else was growing around me, and my skills in sports just couldn't keep up with size anymore. So I ended up getting cut from all these teams that I was playing on. So okay, what's next? And my uncle, going back to him, who got me into things like horror and collecting, and he was a big bodybuilder at the time, and he's like, listen, like, you want to start working out? And I was like, yeah. So we started doing that, and I just noticed a lot of change in me physically and mentally. Then all of a sudden, I remember telling my guidance counselor, like, you know what, I'm not doing college, I'm going to wrestling school. And then it became like, all right, let's talk to your parents. Like, this is, you're one of the littlest kids here, and now all of a sudden you want to go to wrestling school. This is going, like he said, around that time that we talked about. And then it never ended up coming in fruition. I did like some backyard stuff. I never went to wrestling school at the time, but then I went to college. I got into fitness training, which I've been doing for like the last 18 years. So when I started getting my own money, my own paycheck, I said, you know what, I'm gonna now pay and go to wrestling school. And I went to a wrestling school locally, and I was there about a year, and then I started working in the independents for about another year, I would say, maybe a year and a half. And it was just something we did. Like we trained once a week, and I might have had a show like twice a month or something like that all over, and I would just kind of travel around New England. And at that point, like, a part of me still wishes I continued with it, but things happen in life with like uh got married, I opened a gym, and all of a sudden I said to the guy, listen, I need to take time off because I've got all this stuff that's kind of lining up at the same time. And it just, life happened, I never went back. And a part of me kind of wishes that I had, but at the same time, I'm a very big believer that everything happens for a reason. So I mean, it could have been cool, and I could have a little regret with it, but at the same time, I feel like if that didn't happen, then maybe something, if that happened, then maybe something else didn't happen. So
Right, like
but
this, for instance. Yeah,
exactly, right?
yeah,
So I mean, everything kind of in my world like happens that way. So yeah, that's kind of my wrestling story in a nutshell. It started young, but then it didn't really take off until I was a little bit older.
yeah. Well, yeah, this is that's fascinating. I love how you definitely, I think you're right about the fact that there's still that element of that, I think, within you still, and I think it presents itself really well, obviously, in this creative medium that we do here. So I think you're still utilizing it in some manner, and then obviously you still have the physical fitness side of things, but obviously
Right.
in a different way, of course, I'm sure. But no, I love that because I have a few friends, actually. One who I went to college with, who just went through like the independent Ring of Honor,
Oh yeah,
and doing all that, and then now she just made the WWE. So I'm like, okay,
yeah,
wow. So
really.
yeah, so I can tell you
Awesome.
later.
Yeah, yeah, for
But
sure. That's really cool. I had a buddy. I'm trying to think of like anybody that I had a friend who I met when I was in it. His name is Vinny. They call him Vincent on wrestling, the King of Horror. I met him during my little independent run for that year because we both liked horror movies, so we kind of started becoming friendly because like basically just on that aspect alone is like, hey, we're huge Lost Boys fans, so we kind of connected. And he really, then he got into fitness for a little while, and then he went back into wrestling. So now he's killing it. Like I think he's just signed to AEW now and all that
nice,
other
yeah.
stuff. And super cool guy. And he was actually on my channel talking Lost Boys, like probably within the first 6 months I started it. He came on and we talked Lost Boys, and it's just so cool to see like that he's stuck with it, and how far he's been able to go with it as well. And so he's probably the one that I would say I keep in contact with the most that has really made it pretty far in it. So it's just nice to see that, like, it's nice to see when people set their mind to something and just see it, work
Yeah,
out.
yeah.
So
No, I think you nailed it there, and I think that's it's cool that we know people in adjacent spaces that
for
are
sure.
or I don't know. For me, it's like it's something that, like, it shows something that, like, you're like, oh wow, you have that drive, and those people doing those things, and I think seeing that makes you happy because you're happy for them, because like them, in some kind of manner. It doesn't even have to be somebody who went through either of those things that we just mentioned, but like I'm sure people who are watching this are like, it's like there's people who are, friends of friends who are like it's like they have such a drive in them that they put forth something like, I mean, even like going on and doing something like a YouTube channel.
Sure.
This takes a lot of energy.
It
and
does. Yeah.
and I all the people, obviously a lot of the content creators who've been on here, and then like I know they know that, and I know the people even watching this, like even if you have like an Instagram page or whatever, it's you put a lot of effort into it. Hopefully if you care about it, something will come up. So anyway.
I agree, man. I totally do. It's you, whatever you put your time into is gonna hopefully prosper, because it's hard to say. Like, it's just, if you care about what you do and you put a lot of time forth and effort towards it, it's always going to kind of progress in some aspect. And then I think it's really just up to you to find those avenues to feel like, okay, well, how can this progress more? If that's something that you want, if you're just like, hey, I'm happy with what I'm doing, this, great. But if you're looking to kind of find that next path or whatever, it takes time, and it takes a lot of patience. And I think that a lot of people have a tough time with not just the time, but the patience, because I've seen that even in my industry that I work in fitness, where, maybe a trainer's not doing as much as they want to do right away. And I said, listen, the most patient person is going to be the one that's going to end up, ahead in the end, because it's just going to take all those other people to not be patient and be like, okay, I'm backing out. I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna do something. And then all of a sudden now you're moving up the ladder because you're the one that was like, you know what, I'm going at this pace. And I think that's what it is. The long game is really something I don't think a lot of people have, especially in this day and age. It's like everybody wants to be a superstar, like, in 2 weeks, and realizing that it's not that easy. Like, and it just does. It takes effort. And it takes just time and patience, and not getting frustrated where, I'm sure yourself or even me have all of a sudden like, oh, why haven't I got to this many subscribers yet? This is a waste. I'm just going to quit. But then it doesn't get us anywhere. So you just say, you know what, I'm just going to do more, do better. And I feel like if the product is good, the people will come eventually.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And I think that's a good segue back to like the channels itself for both of us. I think that's something I'm fascinated by, just the maintaining of the hobby that we're doing here, and sharing that we're talking with other people. I think is the fascinating thing, because we're all here because we all love movies, right? And like that's hopefully why people are here to check out your film journey. And speaking of that, I know you mentioned your uncle. I was going to say, was he kind of the catalyst, you said, for this entire obsession of yours?
Yeah, he really was. I think he's always been a big fan of horror, even since I was a little kid. And I remember, I would go to my grandmother's. He was still living here at the time, and my dad might like drop me off for a little while. And my uncle would always try to get me as a little kid to be like, hey, just watch this one scene in Friday the 13th Part 3. Hey, this was 3D. Look at how cool this is with the yo-yo and all this stuff. And hey, here's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's my favorite movie. Check this out. And my dad would like walk in and be like, shut this off, and it was always like kind of one of those things that was always there, like dangling in front of me. And because it felt so like I shouldn't be watching it, I was always very more intrigued by it. And then I can remember another big one was he gave me like these Fright Flicks cards for my birthday, like the whole set. And I remember looking at those pictures and seeing things like from Fright Night and American Werewolf in London and being like, what is this? Like this is insanity to me. Like, I need to know more. But my parents were pretty strict when it came to like me watching that stuff. I could only watch that stuff if it was on like TV. So like if it was on cable, I could watch it, because I guess they would assume that they'd cut anything out that I shouldn't be technically watching. So
Sure.
a lot of like my early horror movies that I checked out, I saw first on cable TV, and I would record it on a tape or whatever. And that's kind of where it all started for me. And then as I got older, my uncle was still heavily into it. And then it was like, okay, now I'm going to buy the VHS tapes. And then, he's going to give me some stuff, and he's going to give me some posters. And then, so that's kind of where it started. And then when like DVD hit, I was just at that right age where it just was like, that was it for me. Like, I bought every single thing, mostly from the horror end, that I could find. And it was just a wild time back then.
So I know you mentioned the DVDs were kind of the change there, but I kind of want to go back, because I know you said your parents were strict. Was the uncle like the one who he could sneak things for you, or like, I guess? Oh, was it? Yeah,
He was, but I didn't spend like tons of time with him where he could have, at a young age showed me a lot. Like, it was usually, he was always kind of there, maybe watching me for a little while and stuff. But things like he would always get me to look at his like Fangoria magazines and stuff like that. So he was just planting a lot of seeds, and I kind of found that no matter what, I was always attracted to monsters, right? Like for Christmas, my uncle would buy me all the Godzilla VHS tapes. So there was always like these precursors to horror. Like
Right.
X-Files was another big one. Like my dad, we used to watch that every Friday night with my dad and my brother. So that was another big one. Are You Afraid of the Dark, which is still
Oh, yeah.
probably one of my favorite TV shows of all time, is like
Great
it was
Nickelodeon show.
all these like these gateway things that happened where it's like I always kind of knew that there was something about horror that I was really into. Even going back to things like Ghostbusters was as a kid, it was like I just really liked like the ghosts and the monsters and stuff like that. There was something there all the time that I kind of knew that this was the direction it was going to go because I just always had a fascination with like monsters and stuff like that.
Was there any specific memories of growing up where monsters like scared you? Like or like, oh my gosh, but I guess obviously it it didn't work.
No, man, I can tell you this, and people watching this are gonna be like, what the things that always scared me as a kid was like things that should have never like I'm thinking of nightmares that I had on a regular basis. Like I know some people are like, oh, Freddy gave me nightmares for years. Like none of that ever gave me nightmares ever. I can remember some distinct nightmares I had as a kid. Number one was the damn Brady Bunch movie with or no, the one where they went to Hawaii and the tarantula was like crawling up the bed or whatever.
Mhm.
For like weeks, I like was so afraid to like have my feet like hanging out the bottom of the bed because I thought like a tarantula was gonna come up. So like something like that. I remember going to my aunt's as a little kid and we watched La Bamba, and I was like afraid of like plane crashes. I had like nightmares about plane crashes for like weeks. It felt like so like little things like that. I feel like really disturbed me, and I had nightmares. But like actual horror stuff, not that I recall ever giving me a hard time at all.
Huh. That is crazy because I mean I had almost the exact opposite where I was terrified of horror films. I mean I exposed like Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark,
Mhm.
things like that. I obviously watched and X-Files as well, which actually that scared me some. Watching a lot of those Monster of the Week episodes. But I was gonna say, but it switched around probably in like the like Jeepers Creepers time period and
Mhm.
like that early 2000s, and so it's interesting to hear somebody fascinated with all the all of like just like the seeds that you were mentioning that is like, oh, I'm curious about this, and then I guess it really uh maybe cascaded a little bit further when DVDs were available and you had money, that expendable income that you were spending on those.
Exactly. Like that's really where I started really checking things out. Like I really wasn't into like pure horror stuff. Like I knew a little bit until I was probably junior or senior in high school is really where it started to take off because a lot of the kids that I was hanging out with, like we would there would that be that one kid that's like that has Faces of the Death like under his mattress or whatever. So everybody would go to his house and like that stuff like never really did it for me. Like I don't really like Cannibal Holocaust, not really my thing.
Yeah.
Faces of Death, not really my type of horror. Like I was more into things like Fright Night, Lost Boys, Friday 13th. Like I was into more of like that kind of stuff. A lot more campy style horror I'm into more. But then it was like, my uncle would give me VHS tapes. And then when I started working out with my uncle, which we talked about a little bit before, in high school, sometimes I'd go to his house we'd work out about 4:30, like 5 days a week. And either he'd throw on a CD and I would always learn like a lot of new music at that point, like a ton of like, we were really into like 80s hair metal. Like that was all we listened to for like years. And when I was in high school, because that's what he was into. So I'd go there to work out, or that was his time to be like, hey, let's put on this horror movie. Let's, we're working out watching Last House on the Left for the first time, or Hills Have
Right.
Eyes, and he's got it in the VHS. Yeah, so it's like his way of like, hey, we're gonna work out for an hour and a half, but we're also I'm gonna introduce you to all this stuff. So that was really where it really started for me. And then it would be like he'd give me the VHS tape, like he gave me stacks of stuff that he might have had doubles of, or maybe he grabbed the DVD, so he tossed me over to that. But like you said, when I got some disposable income at the time, I got a job and all that, and so me and him, like every Sunday I would look at the ads on Best Buy and stuff, see if there was things on sale. At that time, Circuit City and Best Buy were like loaded with horror stuff.
Yeah.
And I would go on a Tuesday and he would just say, hey, pick me up this, and I would go for him and he'd give me money, and then I would get myself like the same thing. And it just went on for such a long time. And then my friend Keith was really into collecting as well. So him and I for years, every Tuesday would go to the stores, buy some stuff, get lunch. It was just a routine that we had. And back then with DVDs and stuff, I tell people that all the time. It's nothing like it was now in the sense where I could go to a store that had used DVDs, and I mean I could leave with like 25 titles and spend like $50.
Yeah.
And like now you look at it and I'm like, man, I would hate to be starting now in a sense because you get one title for almost $50 sometimes, and I'm like, man, I was running home with like 20 horror movies for that. I'd buy them used for like $1.99 or whatever. Um, Back then, so that's why like my collection of DVDs is so massive because it was just every week I was just coming home with like so much stuff because it was affordable then.
Right. No, I mean, you have a point there, and I mean, obviously, as audiences have shifted, we're into this stuff. So, like, you know, the general masses aren't as either they have the streaming services and a little bit more access to those things. So, obviously, boutique labels are really kind of the direction a lot of this stuff is going. So it makes sense. Which I'm not mad about, but like affordability, I you know, it is definitely something that you know needs to be thought about. And I'm lucky that I have the you know expendable income that I have to do these kind of things and also have this hobby. But I know not everyone does. So
Right.
I was going to say you mentioned you know going on Tuesdays to you know new release days and whatnot. And I was going to say, is there any like standout days that like you recall, like, or is it just kind of you know, more of like a general sense of those years, you know?
Um, it was, I'm just trying to think back. Like, obviously, big ones were like when there was a Friday the 13th box set or something that was released. It was like that was huge for me. Or like, hey, this Elm Street box set is being released this Tuesday. Like, oh my God, we got to get out there. Other ones were like, to me, like when Grindhouse came out, it was the first time I'd ever seen a steel book. I think Best Buy was doing like a steel book on Death Proof and Planet Terror, and it was like the first time I've ever seen it. I don't know if those are like one of the original steel books ever, but like I remember going there to get these things because I'm like, this is wild. Like I've never seen a steel case in my life. So there was always little things like that, and companies, especially like Anchor Bay back then, were really pushing, I think, what we're getting now with some of these boutique labels. Like they were thinking so much out of the box. Like if you remember those big tins, like I posted one on Instagram the other
Oh
day.
yeah.
They were so cool back then. I mean, they suck to display because they're so huge, but like there was just so many different things that they were doing at the time that like when you saw those things on the shelf, it was like mind blowing because it was just so different than everything that things that you've ever seen. So I have like a Wicker Man wooden box and all this other stuff that were really just ahead of their time back then. So as far as like big ones that I remember on Tuesday, like I think for me, like when House of a Thousand Corpses came out for the first time was like a big one. I was big into like all of a sudden there's a new, oh, you know which one is Texas Chainsaw Massacre when they had that like meat one that looked like I don't know if you remember, it looks like a ground beef package.
No, I
Oh,
don't
that was a
know.
big one. I remember my uncle and I being like so excited for that. It was called like the meat pack edition. So the case looked like a pack of ground beef, and then you open it and then the discs inside. So
That's dope.
there was a lot of cool ones like that were just at, Best Buy and stuff. And, their Suspiria had like a double disc Anchor Bay. It was just wild times back then where you'd walk in there and there'd just be aisles and aisles and aisles of stuff. And now it's I don't even go to the stores really anymore. I mean, I may stop if there's something like Best Buy has a limited steel book and I'm driving by. I'm like, oh, I'll go check if they have it. But
Right.
I spend most of my time on boutique stuff now. Just because again, like it just gets crazy financially. And I'm at a point now, and I'm not sure if you feel the same way, but I'm on like triple dips, double dips on things, and I'm like, all right, there's got to be a point in time where it's like I don't need this Blu-ray upgraded to 4K anymore. Like I'm good, like here.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm kind of at right now. Is it's like I'm trying to not be so crazy with it, just because of space and just because again, money wise, it's like okay, what am I going to do with this Blu-ray that I got a year ago if I'm going to just upgrade this to 4K? So it's interesting time. We're in a very transition time right now, and when we thought physical media was going to be dying, it almost feels like in the small circle that we're in, it's like stronger than ever.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think we are in a transition period. Because obviously we're in a really good space when it comes to like the amount of things that are being treated in the way that they are, and it almost feels like a luxury thing
It does.
to get now. Limited editions are a lot more of a thing. Limited runs are more of a thing, and you know, but without getting into like, full blown rants about these things,
I'm down for any of that. So
yeah, yeah. I just think I think it's fascinating. Parts of it, I think accessibility is something that I've talked about plenty of times. But it's something that I think about a lot. And also, like, at the end of the day, like, what is this all going to do when I pass on or whatever? I don't know who's going to have it or what I'm going to give it to or what, or I wish I could share this stuff more with people because, like, obviously this is a very like I can watch this myself. A lot of my friends and people in the community can get their own copy and watch it themselves or whatever, but it doesn't really feel like it's something I can share too much more than with the people that I can, talk to about. But you have to have the finances or the resources to get these things. So anyway,
I totally agree. It's an interesting hobby, because again, like you said, I mean, whoever's going to make the decisions after we're gone, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, luckily in my head, I'm hoping, that like my son gets into this stuff because that's an easy transition to me to be like, take everything, like you do whatever, you want to get rid of, sell it, you want to sell it, and at that point, I'm thinking that kids would be, they'd know what to do with this stuff, right? Like if it's eBay or something else, like they know that there's a way to get money for this if they're not interested in keeping it,
right.
kind of thing. The last thing you want to do is all of a sudden you pass and this just goes off to Savers or like a thrift store or something like that. You're like, oh my god, like whoever it was could have made more money. It's just, again, it takes time and effort and patience to like list and all this stuff. And you're right in the sense that it does feel like a luxury. The accessibility now is easy in some aspects. I mean, I know, like you said, there's limited runs and some people have a tough time getting those. If they don't have the finances right away and they wait, that could be gone and they can never get it again. So it is an interesting time. But what's crazy about this time that I've never seen before is that every day I wake up and I look at my phone and I'm like, I've never in these 20 something years I've been collecting seen so many things that are like coming out. Like it never stops. Like,
Oh, I know.
and it's like every day I'm looking, I'm like, do I have to pre-order that? Okay, this, and I just can't believe there's this much news and release stuff like on a daily basis when it comes to physical media. Like it's just for something that's supposedly dying in one area to be so like aggressive in the other. And a part of me is kind of like, are these people like see that there might be a light at the end of the tunnel? Like, let's just get everything out we can now before this whole ship like sinks. Like I don't know why there's so much like of so much coming out because it's hard for most people to keep up with, and
Oh, for
even me
sure.
included. Like, I mean, luckily, like I said, I've got a lot of these titles that are coming out that it's just my decision if I'm going to upgrade or not. If it's something I don't own, I'm always going to grab it. If it's something that I might have like a nice Blu-ray of, I might be like, yeah, I don't know. Like a lot of the Scream Factory stuff, like I've upgraded some, but I'm like, I have all the Blu-ray collector's editions. Now it just comes to the time, is it worth me upgrading to a 4K for almost the exact same thing I have with maybe a little bit of a better picture quality? So, I'm a little bit more skeptical on that, but when Vinegar Syndrome says, hey, we're putting out sidekicks on 4K in this nice box, and this hasn't seen the light of day since VHS, then I'm jumping on it right away,
Right.
So it is just very interesting to see like where the physical media world is going because there's just so much out there. Like a lot of these companies are putting out like what, 4 movies a month, and expensive movies too, not like $10, and um but like what are your thoughts on that? Are you upgrading everything, or do you have you sold so much where you're just re-getting things that you may have had in the past, or do you still have a lot of the stuff that you're trying to figure out what the next step is for you?
I think it's similar to what the path that you have, at least on the transition from Blu-ray to 4K, for instance. So like a lot of the stuff I already have on Blu-ray. So unless it's something I really care about, I'll upgrade it. Or if it's something I've never owned, like I'll just get the newest edition, of course, because it's like, yeah, I mean, this came out. So like I'll tell you, like, an American Werewolf in London, like the Arrow
Right.
4K that just came out, I think last year. Even though the Blu-ray came out, years prior on Arrow, and I never had that copy. So like I'm just like, okay, well, I can do this, right? Like I
Mhm.
lucked out in that particular instance. But or something like, you mentioned Scream Factory. They're putting out a lot of 4Ks of a lot of their older titles, and like the Halloween films, right? I only had Halloween on just a normal, I think, Anchor Bay Blu-ray or something like that. And I'm like, I don't have any of them, so I might as well just get all five 4Ks. And that's how I did it. And so I lucked out in that instance.
Right.
But for me, I had a decent sized DVD collection, not very much, couple hundred, which is a lot for some people, but like where I'm at now, it's a very small amount compared. But when I used to work at a record store, and we would have Blu-rays come in, and I was able to upgrade for really cheap. So I lucked out in that instance, but not everyone has that luxury. So if you have a lot of DVDs, like you have to think about, like, do I want to upgrade this or not? So it's interesting time. I have kind of a follow up, kind of like backtracking a little bit. I was gonna say, when did that transition for you kind of happen with Blu-ray and 4K? Was it kind of just natural, or like did coming on and like getting a channel, like obviously being on this platform, did that help that process, or like?
As far as transitioning from Blu-ray to 4K, like how quickly I did that?
Oh, I guess like I guess thinking back more, like that DVD transition to Blu-ray, was that pretty natural, or did
Yeah,
it
you
take
know
some
what it
time?
was is I don't remember like what year that was, but I can remember the day I went from DVD to Blu-ray, and the difference was so drastic to me at the time that I knew I kind of like I had to make the jump. Like Lost Boys being one of my favorite movies of all time. I remember buying that, and I can remember buying House of a Thousand Corpses on Blu-ray. That was like the first two I bought. I got the Blu-ray player. I remember putting those things on, and to me it was like for a movie like Lost Boys that I had watched my whole life, and putting it on Blu-ray and being like, this is something different. Like I feel like I've never seen this movie before, and that switch was like, holy crap! Like that's all it took for me to be like, okay, I'm gonna start getting more Blu-rays. But it was more Blu-rays. Like I was really focusing on like the older titles, because like I didn't see such a drastic difference between something that came out in 2009 or whatever it was,
Right.
whenever those came out. And then obviously Blu-ray, I started to just really get a lot of that stuff. Still a lot of mainstream stuff, like I'm not really doing a lot with, as far as upgrading to even Blu-ray to now. Like some I will. Like I just bought what was it? I just bought Flashdance or whatever, like on the Steelbook, because it was a cool looking Steelbook. I only had it on DVD. I jumped to the 4K because it's been a while since I've upgraded that. But more or less, like right now, I'm not buying any mainstream stuff because number one, I'd rather spend my money on boutique and like things like I loved Megan. I loved it. I don't own it. I will get it, but that might be something where it's like, when that goes on like Black Friday and I can
Yeah,
get it for $5,
exactly.
then I'll get something like that, or things that I know like I will have access to, or you never know, Megan could have a better edition come out, so it's that patience game. Like I don't need everything right away unless I see that it's like limited. So a lot of
Exactly.
these limited stuff, like I'm all over, but it's a lot of these other things that I know I can hold on to and not miss out on anything, then I just let those ride until I can get them for a good price. But the the jump from DVD to Blu-ray was pretty natural to me, but the jump from Blu-ray to 4K has been a little bit shaky because, and again, I'm just somebody who's like, hey, it looks good, it sounds good. I'm not a big tech guy. I don't know the ins and outs of like all this stuff. So I don't see such a humongous difference from what I'm watching it on from Blu-ray to 4K. There's some, and sometimes I feel like the Blu-ray looks better because, Friday the 13th, I was like, I can't even see this guy in the woods right now that I could see on my Blu-ray. Like, so to me, I was like, I'd rather just watch the Blu-ray. So I haven't upgraded a lot of my stuff unless it's something I just absolutely love and I'm hoping to get a different experience out of. Like I bought The Fog and Prince of Darkness and I upgraded those, but I didn't upgrade like The Craft or Cat People. Like I'm fine with what I have, So just things like that is kind of where my mindset is, just because there's so much, and we're in a weird transition where a lot of these Blu-rays and DVDs are worthless in a sense. Like in most situations, like what am I going to do? Just tote these away? I can't sell them because I'm not going to get anything for them. So what's the point of getting rid of these for like $2 a piece?
Mhm.
Same with VHS. There was a point I sold my whole, pretty much 90% of my VHS collection in like 2008. I gave away like $80. I gave this guy like 200 VHS tapes because it was a weird time where like you couldn't get anything for them. They were just taking up space. No one wanted them. And now all of a sudden, now I kick myself so hard for doing that because I'm like, man, I had so much stuff there that's now I wish I still had, that is way more valuable. If I would have just waited like 2 more years, it had like a resurgence. So, that's kind of where I'm at. Is I'm very hesitant about it a lot of the times because I don't know what to do with a lot of these other titles besides just tote them away.
Yeah. And I mean, that goes back to our space thing too. And we don't know the trends of a lot of things. Like you're saying, like, I mean, vinyl is another thing that kind of came out of nowhere, but made sense
Yes.
when, when Napster and audio platforms like that started existing. And you're like, okay, well, maybe I should like go back to these things, and CDs kind of went away, which is weird because it's like, yeah. But like to me, it's like, thinking about these different mediums, like VHSs, for instance. I'm not huge on them myself. I like them for aesthetic purposes, at least for like horror films or like
Mhm.
classic Disney movies and whatnot. But for the most part, like it's the opposite thing. Like I want the latest edition, like the Blu-ray, like which is pretty much good enough for a lot of things, or the
Mhm.
4K of something. But like if it's like if it's music, it's like I want the record because the
Right.
record sounds better, even though it's like the oldest of the the I guess of the current iteration of mediums that you can use music for.
Mhm.
It's just weird how that works. But anyway,
Yeah,
um,
I mean, it makes sense. I mean, the VHS thing, like, I have a VHS player, but I'm not, if I have to choose to watch Lost Boys, I'm not taking the VHS and watching it. But it's just, to me, it's a nostalgia thing. I like VHS tapes just because they're cool to display in the sense they stand up on their own. It's like, it's just different. And I just kind of, the box art's really cool. Like, I'll just show you right here. Like, I'm so weird when it comes to things. And I tell people all the time, like, everybody has their own rules when it comes to collecting. Like, Mel laughs at me because, like, I'm a slipcover guy, like, to an extent. Like Vinegar Syndrome, I want the slips. If
yeah,
I got Megan with no slip, I don't care. If I get Megan with a slip, I'll usually just toss the slip in like I have like a big box just full of slip covers, and she thinks I'm absolutely insane for that because I'm not a really a big. I don't care about them if they're just like paper cardboard because like little things like this, like I just got this, which
yeah,
I've never seen this before, so it was one I wanted to jump on because I didn't own this. I don't think I've never even seen this movie
I haven't either.
from Screen Factory, brand new. But and I know I'm a stickler, but man, this bar on the top, this annoys me. Like I would rather just have this thing all fluent black, and then if you want to know what format it is, you just pop this up. Okay, it says it on there. Like for instance, I got this, so like this is cool. Like I'll keep this slip on because it looks better. Like and that's what I like about VHS tapes is that they all just like the artwork, and it wasn't like digital code and all this other nonsense on there. That's just my weird brain on how it works, and that's why I like boutique stuff, slip covers and all that because it's more art style like artwork and not doesn't just look
Commissioned,
like a piece of paper on top of this thing.
yeah. You get
But
commissioned, or you get original art, like poster art, like
right.
those
It's
things
weird.
are.
It's weird how my brain works. But we were talking about music, and I mentioned to somebody today um, we were talking about music, and I said I'm sure I still have my CD collection. I said I'm sure that's probably the next thing that's going to come back around because I have this here. I don't know why I bought these. I haven't even opened them. Look, I got people
Yep.
putting out cassettes now. Who would have ever thought that we'd be getting cassettes again? I mean, it's literally probably like one of the worst sounding formats ever, but it was just a convenience to have it like in your car or whatever. And these companies are putting out cassette tapes now, and people like me and other people are buying them, and I'm just buying them because like VHS, they're easy to display. They stand up. You can have them stacked or over. So it's just a very interesting time with collecting, and I think that that collector's mindset, they know what they're going after here because they got people
Yeah,
like me and
they
you
got
that are
us.
like,
We're
"Okay,
we're
I'll buy
hooked. We're hooked.
it." Right. And young collectors out there have reached out to me a bunch of times being like, should I buy this? Should I buy that? I feel like if I don't upgrade to this, I'm not really a good collector. And I try to tell them like we're not here and promoting all these things to get you guys to buy everything. Some people, like you said, they financially can't do it, number one. And the people that are buying everything, they're going to run into problems like you and I have who've been doing this a long time is that like you really don't understand what this game is like when you have zero space left. That's the worst feeling in the world when all of a sudden you walk in a room and you've got stacks of movies on the floor this high and you're thinking to yourself, what am I going to do with how am I going to get these off the ground? That sucks to me, and that's what I'm really trying to avoid is like having to somehow finagle my house to like fit these things in where I could easily like that's why when I upgrade now sometimes I'll tote the DVD away because I need that space. And it's hard, man, because I don't think people really get it until they're at that point where it's like, I don't know what else to do. And I don't want my whole house to be movies. Like back here, like I like this setup. Could I go wall to wall shelves back here? I could, but I'd rather have different stuff going on in here. But that's the toughest thing, and that's the scariest thing is when you're like, I've got too much stuff and not enough space.
Yeah, my dad's a hoarder, so I understand that mentality, but also like like we were saying with everyone and like people reaching out and whatnot and asking if certain things are worth something or should I get this or whatnot. But I think the biggest thing that I would like push or at least promote is obviously get the things that you enjoy. Like obviously like there's a lot of it's hard because a lot of these things are blind buys for a lot of us, but if there are certain things that you maybe watched on television or you had checked out on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever streaming service you found, Shudder or something, like I think that's where like I think that's the cool thing about this community is we're trying to find our own identities within it. And like going back to that wrestling analogy, it's like that's what I love so much about it is because there's so much variety in the cast of characters that we all are, and it's the same with people who are just watching our content and commenting. I think that's what's so cool about it is we all have our preferences and our tastes, and we just get the luxury of we have a channel and we're trying to put this thing forward, I guess, this love. So anyway, that was my little mini rant.
No, I mean we're all looked at as influencers, just like the people I was watching before I started the channel. To me, were influencers. Like I remember going on and watching people's like favorite horror movies, and if there was something in there I had never seen before, I was like, oh, I gotta go find that because I trusted what they were saying. So people coming to you and I with suggestions is probably because we're looked at as like, hey, they have this, they'll know if this is worth an upgrade or not. And again, like you said, it really just does depend on what they like. And I think a lot of times what it is they'll be like, I have I'm just trying to think of I have Malignant on Blu-ray. If I don't get the 4K, I just bought this, but if I don't get that 4K, is it like, am I less of a collector? I'm like, do you think the Blu-ray looks good? Yeah. I'm like, doesn't keep the Blu-ray then. It's fine. Like, yeah. don't spend another, $30 on or $25 on it if it's not necessary. But, like I said, something like this Haunting of Julia, like, of course I was going to get this because I don't own it and I've never seen it and it's a 70s horror movie. So of course that's something I want to jump on. And, we're here to kind of express like, hey, this is out. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but here's our opinion on it.
It's exposure. So, it's exposure.
Exactly. So I get that we definitely have that push, but I don't want people to think like you said, everybody's different. Like, they don't want to look at you and be like, well, I have to get it because Nathan bought that, or I have to get it because Garrett bought that. Like, no, like you make your own decisions. We're just here to tell you which ones we think, wants to check out and to look for.
Yeah. And I think this is a nice transition, actually. I'm going to throw it back at you. Sure. You probably have mentioned several of them throughout this whole conversation, but what would be some of your favorite films that you've like kind of grew up with and kind of still stick around to this day? Like, what are some of your favorites that you still love so much?
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm just the type of movies that I really just love are mostly the ones I grew up with still. Like they just hold such a strong place in my heart. And some people might look and be like, oh, you don't like the classics? No, they're okay. I like them. But like the ones that I can always go back to is like Teen Wolf. That's one. Back to the Future, Karate Kid, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990, The Lost Boys, Fright Night. Like these are movies that like in my head, like I could watch day in and day out and never get tired of those things. The Friday the 13th series, the Halloween series, like these are all ones that I just, to me, are just timeless. And that is what makes me so excited about finding new movies. Like I've been promoting this on my page and stuff like that, but there's a new movie coming out, Bury the Bride on Tubi. I was at Panic Fest with the RadPack a couple weeks ago or last week, and we were lucky enough to see this movie for the first time. Like the cast was there, the director was there. He said this is the first time the cast is even seeing this thing done. And it was cool, man. It was something that like to see something that really was like, wow, like this really shocked me on this twist or this, it's a real cool movie. And it's cool to see some of that kind of stuff kind of making its way back into the horror genre. And I just hope more people check it out because that's a movie that I would be like, man, I want this thing on physical media, but being on Tubi, being like a smaller, budget film, like it's only going to get that opportunity if people want watch it and talk about it and stuff like that. If not, it's just going to sit on Tubi and die. But so like things like that where you're finding these new movies. Like I talked about Megan, I thought that was a real cool horror movie. I just saw Evil Dead Rise. I thought that was pretty good. It was a great addition to the series and to the franchise and stuff. So there is still a lot of good stuff coming out, and it's just utilizing us and other people that are talking about this stuff to help you guys kind of find new things that are out there. But when it comes to what I still love, I'm looking over here. I got Creep Show, love it. All these posters behind me. Again, they're not classics, but for me, like Brain Scan and Monkey Shines, like our movies, Dawn of the Dead, I've got right there. It's movies that I absolutely just still love.
Yeah, no, I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. Um, I think there's a lot of really great content that like going to that fest. I was gonna say you met KB there too.
I did,
I
yeah.
wish I was able to go back up there, and it just didn't work out with timing for me. But that sounds like a really fun experience, and I think it's those things too. Is like I don't know if you've ever been to like an Alamo Draft House, but we have them here in the Midwest at least, and but like there's like movie parties or just like things like this. Obviously, even this is like I think that we have a lot of opportunity to celebrate the things that we enjoy.
Mhm.
And so hopefully people can go to like things like maybe like a live event or like a con or something like that to experience these kind of things. And but at the same time, it all depends on like situation, right? So it,
Yeah, it was a real cool experience, and to be honest, like the Alamo Draft House type of stuff, like we don't have anything like that around me. This was the first time I've ever been to an event where it was like, hey, we're just going to watch movies all day. Um, Usually I have like there's a lot of conventions that come around me, so I'm used to that scene where talking to KB and Mel and Justin who were there, like they've never been to that type of environment. So I was in a whole different element because I'm so used to like walking around and everything you wanted to do, it cost you money, extra money, and hey, we're in a line for an hour and you get to meet this person, and it's like you're in it and then it's see you later. Like it's just different. So now we're all of a sudden I'm in a situation where everybody's in these theaters and mingling in a lobby, and Barbara Crampton's just walking around and Scout Taylor Compton is just walking around, and I'm sitting there like, I can just walk up to this person and get an autograph and take a picture, and somebody not an agent not tell me to give them money or shoo me away. Like it was such a different environment for me. Like I wasn't even sure how to act, and I don't really have problems like walking up or talking to people, but like I was like, wow, like this is so different there. If she was booked at like a convention, it would be a totally different situation.
oh yeah.
And it was just hard for me because I was like, wow, like I thought I was bothering them or being like rude if be like, hey, can you sign this? And they were great. Like they were so cool. And I'm like, man, like I wish there was more of these kind of events like where I am, because it was so much more personal and you got to talk to directors and stuff like that, like they were just me or you, and not feel like you were just one of 100 people in line for a split second trying to get their autograph. So it was definitely a cool experience for sure. And I'm hoping that, I can definitely go back in the future.
Yeah, no, and I hope that similar things happen to everyone who's listening too. Like I hope that people are around situations like that, or at least have something that they can go to. Even if it's like a drive-in or something. Because like I live an hour away from a drive-in theater, which I don't ever really go to, but it's an option, and I think it's really cool. And the option, that's the thing, is like the options. I think at the end of the day, it's like you can sit at home, you can watch streaming, you can, if you have extra income, you can do this kind of thing or whatnot. But anyway, going back to this, I know you were mentioning some people they had met during this fest. Thinking about some of your actors and actresses that you enjoy, what are some of your favorites in that camp? Do you follow anyone in particular?
Not current. I'm trying to think of anybody current that I follow. I again, I there is something about Scout Taylor Compton that I've always kind of been drawn to, and I don't know if what it is, but I mean, I always check out her stuff, all the time. I mean, Barbara Crampton being there was great because I mean, I loved a lot of her stuff, from Beyond to Reanimator to what's the full moon one there?
Oh man,
God,
I know you're talking about. It's completely blanking
I
on me.
forgot what it is. But yeah, like a lot of those ones that she was in, and that's really cool. I mean, I was always big on like Phoebe Cates was another one. Like a lot of my favorite movies she's been in. Elizabeth Shue is another one where it's like I look back on a lot of movies that I love, and I'm like, oh, she always is in those movies. And growing up, Michael J. Fox was like one of my favorite actors to kind of follow, and you always just wonder like with him, like what could have been with him because he was just like the face of on so much stuff back then that I absolutely loved. And he was somebody I definitely follow. I'm a big like I think it was just the time I grew up, but Corey's guy, like love all the Corey's movies, even though they start getting a little bit junky in the 90s and whatnot, but it was always something as a kid I really loved. Um Trying to think like even like Tom Cruise like gets a bad rap and stuff like that, but I feel like everything
Actor.
he's in is pretty damn decent. Like even going back to like the 80s, I'm like every movie that I see him in, like through the 80s and 90s, I'm like, they're good. So as much as you might not like him as a person, I'm like, the guy delivers. He's not just taking random roles, all over the place. So like, even after seeing like Maverick and stuff, I'm like, holy crap, like he's still going out there and doing it. So like those are just a kind of a few. But most of them that I follow is always like people more or less in like the 80s and 90s. I'll kind of follow along.
No, that makes sense, and I'm glad that you were able to meet some of those people, at these things and interact with some of them, like in a very casual space, right?
It was very different, but very, very nice. I mean, it was really cool that it was so not structured like that because when you meet these people at conventions, it can go either way. Like Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp, like one of the nicest people ever. She'll spend time with you. She'll like, hey, let's do this. I'll come over here, and But then other times you meet somebody like I met Alicia Silverstone. Not that there was anything bad, but there was so much going on. It was like, boom, what do you want signed? Okay, boom, all right, see you later. And it was like in and out. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I'm down $60. And that lasted like 2 seconds. Now, granted, same thing with like collecting. I was really in the mix of horror conventions, luckily, way back when like I could leave a convention, spend $100 and come home with like 6 autographs. Where now it's very different. So when I go to these conventions now, I'm always like, there might be like 2 people that I'm on like, oh, I want to get them just because it's a bucket list item for me. Alicia Silverstone being one, never seen her anywhere. So I'm like, she's a big name, somebody I really liked. I'll spend the money because that's the only person I'm going to meet today. So I've gotten a lot of things in the past. Like I've got a ton of Robert Englund autographs. If I was meeting Robert Englund for the first time now, I mean, he's like $120. I met him at like $30 a piece before, So things are very different. And again, I feel for the younger generation that are trying to like do all this stuff that we're able to do and how much this stuff costs is just, it's crazy.
Well, it's cool because like I actually behind me, I don't know if you can see it. You can kind of see like the outline. That's a Doug Jones, Pan's Labyrinth thing that I got at the convention that he signed, and he came to Springfield, Missouri, which not many people do. But it was a convention. That was the first convention I ever went to, and Doug was just like the nicest person. Like he spent like 5 minutes with me. Like
That's awesome.
that's what's so crazy. Like there's so many people, and I mean, it took me like an hour and a half to get there, but like I'm not used to meeting people, and like because I guess I'm more in the times where I'm around those types of people, it's a little bit more casual, weirdly enough, like Alamo Drafthouse, because like I remember reading lines with Greg Sestero from The Room with
That's
him,
awesome.
and like like
That's a good.
he's just a dude, and like that's the thing is like these are all just people. But anyway, going back to some of those people you just mentioned too, I know you mentioned some directors. Do you have any like favorite directors that you like to follow?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like anything, again, growing up in the 80s and 90s, like anything Spielberg, I'm gonna watch anything like that. But right now, like especially when it comes to horror stuff, like big on Ty West. I mean, everything he's done for me has been great. Like when I saw House of the Devil for the first time, I absolutely was just floored on like, I'm like, how did this guy make this look like it came out in like the 70s? Like I just couldn't wrap my head around like how this movie was made now. And then, he did Innkeepers and he did like a Jim Jones type of thing. I think that was him and Eli Roth, I think. I don't remember. But everything he's done, I really liked. And then all of a sudden, X and Pearl kind of came out of nowhere, and I was like, oh my god! Like the idea that this guy like went and filmed all this and like it was done, and like he's got this trilogy coming out, and nobody even knew it was happening. Like I was just
Yeah.
astounded by that, and the way he's kind of working this into a big trilogy. I love it. I think that they both have been great so far. I can't wait for Maxine. um I even like I'm really digging when it comes to the horror stuff. Like I know people might be give or take on this, but Jordan Peele to me is has been someone that I'm really into, because like everything he's done is different, but at the same time, it's like for me, it's worked, and I'm always kind of excited to see what he does next. And I think with him, it's going to be interesting because he's, in my opinion, he's had three bangers in a row that are very different. So I think this next one is really going to be an important one for him, because it's either he stays on top, in my opinion, or all of a sudden people are going to try to compare to him like M. Night Shyamalan or something like that, where all of a sudden like he's going to be up here and then start tailing down. And but I like Jordan Peele stuff when it comes to horror, and I really do like Ari Aster, but I'm not sure what's going to go on with this new one that he's got, because I've heard such weird things about Beau is Afraid. I would assume that I would love it because I love Hereditary and I love Midsummer, and I'm like I was so excited for this, but people say it's just so different that it's hard to even, I don't know, it's hard to enjoy, and it's 3 hours. And I don't know, have you heard anything on that? Have you seen it yet?
I haven't seen it yet. I'm in the similar boat with the like I know I probably will enjoy it. I have heard people talk about it, but weirdly enough, I'm okay with the I guess the split reviews of it, because I think like going back to like Midsommar, there's a lot of comical moments in that film. So I could weirdly see I could see a through line of like how this movie came about. And so I don't know, like, and then I mean also like thinking about like Robert Eggers, another contemporary who's a friend of him, and they make similar styles of films, I suppose. But I don't know, like just I think I trust the process. I'll go into it kind of just like I'm probably going to enjoy this, and if if I might have my mind changed, but like that's the thing is like I don't know, like I am a big Ari Aster fan, so it is going to be interesting to kind of jump into this, but I'm a fan of Joaquin as well, and like this is going to be an interesting movie. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's like I'm walking in as Garrett is afraid, because like I do like really like his stuff so far. So this was like I felt like he's just killed it like both times. And I know a lot of people that are give or take on Midsommar. But for me, I thought that was fantastic. One of my favorite modern horror movies in for a long, long time. And yeah, I think with this one, I thought for sure it was just going to be 100% like win. But hearing the reviews, like you said, it's like I'm just a little nervous, because I want to like it, but I know sometimes I'm even thinking in my head like, okay, 3 hours, okay, it's gonna be 3 hours, and I don't know what it's gonna, and I just would hate to leave the theater and be like, that was junk, like I don't want to go there. But I don't know, I guess they just said it's a very different type of movie that anybody's ever seen, not only just his own stuff. But yeah, I'm curious about it. I just don't know if I'm gonna be able to catch it in theaters or have to wait and catch it at home.
Sure. Now, talking about some of those directors, another question I always like to ask is like if you were ever with like in a film or like worked with the director, either behind the camera or like on screen, do you know who you would choose like to work with if you were able to do anything with them?
Man, I don't know. I don't know, man. I mean, again, I go back to like I said, just growing up with the Spielbergs and the Zemeckis and all that other stuff, like being so huge for me as a kid. Like obviously I'd always want to kind of feel like, oh, what would we like to kind of be behind the camera and just see what goes on there, or be in a film like that, because to me they're still putting out epic stuff. And I would say probably just as a safe bet, I would probably say that. But I mean, I'm down for anything different. Opportunities are always huge for me. I'm down for anything. Like if someone's like, "Oh, hey, I want to come check out how a movie's made, or hang out with me behind set," like sure. Like I'm just very curious on like how all that runs. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, just from a safe bet, I would say that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that's a good one, and it would be a fun time. Like that's the thing
For
is like
sure.
it's a safe bet, and at the same time, like it wouldn't be something you wouldn't be upset to be a part of, you
I
know?
mean, hey, I mean, even go on a limb, and I would say if Rob Zombie wants, if I want to hang out with Rob Zombie and watch how he does things, like, hey, I'd be down for that too. You know, as much as I just think with when it comes to him, I think there's some issues with. I always have an issue with Rob Zombie and how he ends movies. I feel like he has a tough time ending movies, but aesthetically, I just feel like it would just supposed to be really cool to be involved in something like that from an aesthetic standpoint. I feel like he's got a pretty good vision behind the camera. It's just sometimes I feel like when it comes to the writing, it can be a little bit of a challenge. And part of me is kind of like, man, I would love to see him continue on and maybe have like a writer like help him out because I feel like he directs and can is pretty well. But I know 9 times out of 10, sometimes like, you know, I even look at what's the last one in Monsters and stuff. And I'm like, there was something there. I just didn't like it, but there was potential there. I just feel like it didn't work for me.
Yeah. I never checked it out myself. Rob Zombie is somebody that I used to listen to his music a lot back in the day. It's not really something I follow too closely. I need to really honestly just revisit a lot of his stuff because it's just something I kind of just shut off for a while, and but it's due for a rewatch. So that's an interesting choice. I like him. I've seen him in concert. So
Oh yeah.
yeah. So now the next question I have is a pretty tough one. So but but it might not be because you might already have it because you have that wrestling background. But if your life was a movie, what title would it be? What would you give your life movie? Like if you had a movie.
Dude, Born to be Rad, man.
There it is. He told you it's easy.
For sure. For sure. There was always something there, man, like in my opinion. Like I always and I it's weird saying this. It really is. Like I always felt like I was there. I always just feel like I don't know something about being in front of a camera for me is like very easy. I know a lot of times people have said like you know I didn't know about YouTube because I just was a little nervous being in front of the camera or you know I don't know if I want to start on YouTube because I might be just nervous. Like this to me is easy. The hardest thing for me was like how do I make this look good aesthetically? How the lights look? How does this look? How does it? That was my biggest issue as far as like what I said or did in front of the camera. I never had an issue with. And you know, like you said, going back to wrestling, like as a teenager, I'm like, I'm going to be a professional wrestler on TV, and then that didn't work out. Then all of a sudden in college, I went through a period of time where I almost was on the real world. So like there was always something where I was like destined to be there. Or even with work, I'll you know, as a fitness coach, you know, people always say like, you know, I get really excited and I'm doing this and running around doing this. Like, oh, you could be like a game show host. And it's like, I don't know if that's an insult or not, but like at the same time, like I could always see myself doing something like that. So for me, like things like the podcast and YouTube, it's come very easy. And I just don't know where this ends up, if anywhere. But you know, I'd be happy with you know, progressing forward and all of a sudden somewhere someone's like, oh, would you want to host a series or a show, whatever, like that's always been my head. Be like, I feel like that's where I belong, but I just don't know how to get there.
Sure. No,
But
I like it. I like it though, because like the thing is like, I mean, so I used to teach public speaking, so like, that's probably where a lot of my confidence grew, is just in the fact that I'm teaching the subject that people are terrified of. But it is weird to like say, especially like in this space, but like I also don't really have much of a hang up on putting a camera in front of me. I think it's just because I just feel like hey, I'm just myself. Like I'm whatever I'm talking about, I want to be energetic about it, and I don't want, and I hope people see this, but like I'm pretty genuine behind like what I'm talking about. So like I'm not I may be like I have a character personality, but it's also like it is me at the same time. So I can kind of sense that with you too, especially with this, you know, this passion we have for the similar things, you know.
yeah, I'm very, you know, honest with advice and stuff like that. Like I'm pretty much like even when we started, you said, all right, and I said, dude, I'm an open book. Whatever you want to talk about, like I'm good to roll. So when it comes to that kind of stuff, very honest with my opinions on things. Like sometimes I'll even get sent something like, hey, review this. If I don't like it, I'm not gonna just say it's good, like just because it like, oh well, I might lose them sending me anything else. Like I'm gonna be honest because I know what it feels like to be on the other end of the screen and taking, what someone in front of me is saying, and I'm not just gonna say it just, because it was sent to me and I don't want to lose that rapport with somebody or anything like that. So when it comes to me, I'm very straightforward, and I'll tell people that they say, I'll say, hey, I'll talk about your product, but I'm just gonna say how it is in my opinion. And when it comes to like my personality on screen or off screen, at work and on here, I'm a little bit more up. If all of a sudden I shut this down and it's like I'm just doing like regular time, like I'm a little
Yeah,
bit more like introverted kind of like it's
sure,
kind of
sure.
like because my job is I have to be 100% like this like for hours and hours a day, that when I'm not in front of a camera or in front of people at work entertaining them or whatever, like I do have a little bit more of like a introverted personality, which is I guess weird to say, but that's the only real difference I would say between me and what you get here and what you might get if you saw me like, just hanging out at the house or whatever.
No, I get that because yeah, I'm also introverted off camera
It's
because
weird to say that, right? Because
have a lot of
everybody
yeah.
seems so, extroverted in the sense. So I don't know. It like even when I met Justin and Mel for the first time this week, like it was fun and cool and we all got along and laughed and stuff. But I wasn't sure if they were expecting me to be more like like
Yeah.
and stuff. But because I don't know. But I mean, it's interesting because it's I don't know. Maybe it's the headband. I pop this on. Boom, new character. Here we go. It's
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I know.
It's me times five or whatever.
Mhm. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, it takes energy, and that's the thing is, like, I mean, in my job too, because like in my job, I have to talk all the time on the phone, like all the time, and like I have to be present all the time. Doing something like this, like obviously, I'm committing time for interviews and for YouTube and interaction with people. But yeah, when I'm off and like I'm offline or something, I'm like I don't want to interact with anybody. I
Right,
just
right.
I just want to like just live what I'm doing, like yeah, around the house, whatever I'm doing, a home project, watching a movie, whatever it is. It's like I
Mhm.
don't I'm okay. I want to calm down. So
Sure. Yeah, it's totally relatable, and sometimes I almost feel guilty for doing it. Like sometimes I almost feel guilty for not being like this 24/7. But like, and then I always ask myself like, why am I like this here? But then all of a sudden, like as soon as like even at Panic Fest, I think like, we're just walking around the lobby and like, just chit chat, and then all of a sudden like Scout walks by, and I'm like, I don't even know what to say to her. Right? Like a part of me was like, I don't even know what to say right now. Like I told you before, like big fan of her. I'm like, I'm usually not nervous to talk to anybody, but I don't know what to say. And then finally we talked to her, blah blah. But then all of a sudden you're just walking around, and we had to decide to cancel the live stream that night because we wanted to stay to see the movie that she was going to be in because it was kind of a last minute drop. So we're like, we can't leave. So Justin said, well, let's just go on camera and just and put on Instagram and YouTube and say, hey, we're going to do the show tomorrow. Like we apologize, blah, blah, blah. So we're just kind of walking around a big lobby, just kind of to ourselves. And all of a sudden Justin's like, hey, do you want to say something? And I'm like, all right. And as soon as that light went on, it was like, boom. I was like, hey, what's up? And like, it was like, that's not how I was acting like 2 seconds before that camera went
right.
on. But I don't know what it is. It's like a trigger that just goes off. And all of a sudden it's like, I can go from like 0 to like 100 in like 2 seconds. It's the same person, same me, but it's just like that I don't know what it is. It's like I'm chill out now to like, okay, I'm ready to go.
Yeah. But like but it's cool though. Like obviously, like I hope that I mean, obviously, why people are here in the first place is to because they know both of like they know one of us or both of us or whatever it is, or they're curious about like a conversation about what we do. Um, we put ourselves out there, and I think that's like I hope that is why people are watching, and so hopefully we can showcase that. Like I mean, obviously, even if you have that energy that comes across like from a camera, I hope it still comes across as like, hey, like clearly this person cares about this thing. So like
Right,
that's
of
why we're
course.
talking about it, you know.
It's the passion, I think, is really at the name of the game, like what it is. And regardless, what I'm doing and where I am, obviously, like I said, I'm going to be 100%, and the passion is always going to be there. So I think that's just really what it is. But it's just an interesting perspective that, who we are in front of the camera is us, but like maybe just turned up a couple notches or whatever.
Right. Up to 11 if Spinal
Yeah.
Tap is
Right.
good. Um, I think you may have already answered it, but I always like to ask this at the end. But how is this medium, or does the film community in general? How's this change your like outlook on life and your worldview?
Man, honestly, like I said earlier, is that this was something that I wanted to do for a long time, and um, I feel like it. I wonder what it would have been like if I did this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when it it wasn't. It's hard to tell because it wasn't so saturated, but you have way more opportunity now. Like this streaming thing didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago, where me and you could have this kind of conversation, like unless we were literally in the same room. So it's evolved so much that it makes it easy to kind of interact and communicate with other creators. And that's what I think this has just been so big for me, is that especially since the pandemic, I've only been on this for 2 years. So since the pandemic, this has become my social outlet now. Like, as much as my job is very social, but my friends that I would see on a regular basis before the pandemic, like things happen. Like, people had kids and they have new jobs, and we went 2 years without seeing each other. So now to get together, it's not as easy as it was because there's always so much else going on. And it's like every week I'm hanging out with some people at some point on this thing. So I just think, to me, how this, as a bigger picture situation, like, it's been awesome because it's brought opportunities, it's brought friendships, even though we don't live close. Like I said, I just met up with Mel and Justin, who we do the podcast together, and we live in all three different parts of the United States. And if it wasn't for this and the podcast, we would have never flew and drove to to a mutual spot and hang out. And we're planning on doing another one next year with a meetup. And then we have other content creators that are like, well, we'll come too. And, it's just really, really cool because if it wasn't for this, like, I wouldn't know anybody. And like we talked about earlier, there was people that I was watching way back in the day, Dead Pit, Justin Ryan, Wet Movie One. These are people that I was watching when I was just even still living at home, that I'm doing videos with now. So it's just wild to think, like, how easy is it to make that happen, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's been great, man, and it's like, honestly, like, my favorite thing to do.
Yeah. No, I sense it, and that's why obviously I wanted you on the film journey, of course, and then also just I think this community is wonderful. So I'm happy that we've had these opportunities, so, and like you're saying, it just goes with the storyline, it progresses with it.
It is, man. It does, for sure, and it's really cool to get you in the mix because, like, again, we haven't collaborated yet, and even on other channels, like I've been on like Ken's channel and Mid-Level Media and Ryan at Disconnected, like I've been in his channel, and there's been other people on channels, but we've never been, I don't think, in any situation where like we were each. Sometimes I'll be on some with like 8 guests, like we were never in the same room together, right?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Yeah.
so yeah, so this has been awesome. That I'm very, very happy that you asked me to come on here. So it's been cool. It's been an easy talk, man.
Yeah, that's what I sense too. So I was gonna say, do you have any final thoughts as we're wrapping this up?
No, man, this has been great. And the only thing I would definitely want to just plug really quick is the RadPack. I mean, I'm at Born to Be Rad, but the RadPack is the podcast. It's I do it with My Killer Podcast and Movie Watch Daily. We've come together, created this like kind of new brand. And we just recently started a new YouTube channel just for that. And I don't think a lot of people have realized that that's a new channel. So if anybody wants to watch that, make sure to look for the RadPack on YouTube, because I just want to make sure, because our last video did really well and it's got like double the amount of views than subs. So I'm thinking it's either they watched it and didn't like it and didn't sub, or they don't realize that they're not watching it on like my channel. Like maybe they just assume like, hey, I clicked the link that Garrett posted, and not think that, oh wait, this is a whole new channel over here. So I just want to make sure that we keep that out there so people realize that that's a different channel that they're watching.
Yeah. I'll put those in the description down below. That way.
For sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm looking forward to meeting your other halves as well on that. Hopefully they can do a film journey with me one day. But this has been an absolute blast, and I love all the weird connections that we have, like with wrestling.
It's
And
been cool, man. Like I said, it's been an easy talk for two people that have never talked ever, besides a couple messages on Instagram. So it's been awesome.
well, yeah. Well, thanks so much for spending the afternoon with me, and I hope everyone at home has enjoyed this conversation as well. Hopefully you're like, it's like, okay, they're gonna keep talking about wrestling, or it is like, hopefully people are like, hey, there's something there, and like, this is why I do this whole thing. Is it's hopefully it's fun for all of you watching this. Is just just seeing the different people in this community, and having the different personalities come forth, right? We all love movies, of course, but there's other things about us that I love to explore too. So it's been fun. Yeah.
Thanks again, man.
Well, anyway, everyone, give it a like, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, all that stuff. Check out all those links and stuff. And as I always like to say at the end, I'm not jonesing around.